Picture this. You're boarding a ship so incredibly massive, so luxurious, that literally the entire world is walking around confidently saying it could never, ever sink. You've got the absolute elite rubbing shoulders with hopeful immigrants, everyone stepping onto what basically felt like the future itself. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a true story that honestly feels like a Hollywood script but is chillingly real. We're unpacking the Titanic disaster, the exact night in 1912 that completely shattered the world's illusion that our technology was invincible. Okay, so let's get right into it. I want you to contrast that amazing dream of absolute luxury with a really grim reality. Imagine standing on a freezing, tilted deck in the pitch black, just watching the ocean slowly swallow everything around you. Over 1,500 people lost their lives that night. It's still one of the deadliest disasters in history. So the core mystery we're unraveling in this explainer is exactly that. What actually went down in those dark waters, and why did so many people have to die on a ship that the entire world had crowned as unsinkable? Section 1. The Ship of Dreams. Now, the RMS Titanic wasn't just a boat, right? It was this massive global statement of power and wealth. You had wildly rich businessmen, massive celebrities of the time, and everyday families all walking up those gangplanks. Inside, just unimaginable luxury. We're talking elegant dining halls, crystal chandeliers. There was even a swimming pool on board. Fun fact for you, a first-class parlor suite cost the equivalent of over $100,000 today. But, and this is a massive but, in exchange for all that aesthetic perfection, they totally lacked the most basic survival necessity: adequate lifeboats. It was an absolute marvel of engineering, but functionally, it was entirely unprepared for an actual crisis. And with all that completely misplaced confidence, on April 10, 1912, the Titanic departs England, heading straight for New York City. The atmosphere at the docks was absolutely electric. Thousands of people are there waving goodbye, just a total sea of smiling faces and fluttering handkerchiefs. It was this huge celebration of human achievement. But beneath all that joyous fanfare, nobody standing on that dock and nobody waving from the decks knew the horrifying truth, that most of those passengers were never coming back. Section 2. Ignoring the warning signs. So as the ship steams away from the coast and gets out into the deep, icy expanse of the Atlantic, the wireless operators are super busy. They're mostly sending out personal messages for all the wealthy passengers. But then these really critical alerts from nearby ships start interrupting, and the message was incredibly explicit: dangerous ice field ahead. These were not vague hints, guys. They were clear, direct warnings that icebergs were spotted right in the ship's path. Message after message rolls in, repeating that exact same stark warning. And yet, they're tragically ignored by the crew as they just keep pushing onward into the freezing dark. You're probably wondering, why on earth would they ignore that? Well, it really just came down to hubris and extreme pressure. The ship's owners wanted front-page headlines. They wanted to impress the world with the Titanic's speed and efficiency. Because of that pressure, they made the fatal decision to maintain near full speed, completely despite the ice warnings. The prevailing belief was just, well, the ship's too massive, it's too heavily engineered, it's just too advanced to fail. And that overconfidence, it was about to become deadly. Section 3. Panic on the ocean. Now, the night of April 14th was remarkably dark, and the ocean was unusually calm, almost like glass. It's that kind of chilling, eerie stillness that always seems to precede a disaster. Walk through this timeline with me really quick. We start with that optimistic departure on April 10. By the day of April 14, those critical ice warnings are flowing in and being ignored. Then we hit the tipping point. 11:40 p.m. on April 14, the iceberg is finally spotted. And then, just a couple of hours later, at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, the entire massive ship sinks. The window between a perfect, luxurious voyage and total destruction was just incredibly narrow. Let's zero in on that 11:40 p.m. moment. Imagine the sudden, heart-stopping shout from the lookout up in the crow's nest, just completely piercing the quiet night. "Iceberg, right ahead!" The crew reacts immediately. They're spinning the wheel, desperately trying to turn this unimaginably heavy steel structure away from the ice. But with the ship moving at near full speed, physics simply wouldn't allow it. It was already too late. So here is the actual mechanical breakdown of what happened next. Step 1. The iceberg didn't actually hit head-on. Instead, it violently scraped all along the side of the Titanic. Step 2, that scraping motion tore open multiple compartments deep down beneath the waterline. And Step 3, freezing Atlantic water violently rushes inside. What is so surreal about this is that up on the upper decks, a lot of the passengers barely even notice the impact. Some were literally joking about the ice. But deep below deck, the ship's designer, the guy who knew the blueprints inside and out, he realized the horrifying mathematical truth immediately. The Titanic was mathematically doomed. It was going down. As the crew frantically scrambles to get the lifeboats ready, that fatal flaw we talked about earlier becomes a terrifying reality. There just aren't enough boats for everyone. And making a catastrophic situation so much worse, lifeboats were actually being launched half-empty. This was driven by pure disbelief. Passengers literally refused to believe this unsinkable marvel was sinking. They didn't want to step out of a warm, brightly lit ship into a tiny wooden boat in the freezing dark. By the time reality actually set in, panic just exploded. Families were violently separated, kids were crying, and in this haunting, incredible display of duty, the musicians actually kept playing music to try and calm the escalating chaos on deck. Section 4. The Final Dark Moments. Around 2:20 a.m., the whole situation reaches its grim climax. The massive ship tilts violently, the structural integrity completely fails, and the Titanic breaks apart. Those brilliant lights that had been illuminating the ocean just flickered and went out forever, plunging everything into total darkness as the ship disappeared beneath the surface. I really want us to pause on this number for a second. More than 1,500. Over 1,500 lives ended that night. Most were hopelessly trapped on board, while others were left floating in the icy water, which, by the way, was a lethal 28 degrees Fahrenheit, literally below the normal freezing point. The historical accounts tell us that the screams in the pitch-black darkness lasted for hours. And then there was just silence. It is just a staggering, sobering human cost. Section 5. A Legacy of Hubris. The very next morning, news of the disaster hits the mainland, and the entire world is absolutely shocked. The collective global consciousness literally could not compute how the Titanic could sink on its very first voyage. Massive investigations in both the US and the UK quickly revealed that, look, this wasn't just some random act of nature, it was a completely preventable cascade of human errors. The fatal mistakes included repeatedly ignored iceberg warnings, a deliberate, conscious lack of enough lifeboats, maintaining excessive speed through known danger zones, and just incredibly poor emergency planning that led to those chaotic, half-empty lifeboats. But out of all that immense darkness did come permanent systemic change. This tragedy completely rewrote maritime safety laws, protecting countless future generations. First, it became strict international law that ships absolutely must carry enough lifeboats for every single passenger on board. Second, global ice patrol systems were created to constantly monitor and broadcast ice threats. And third, because of these strict new rules, maritime travel became vastly safer. The loss of the Titanic directly resulted in the safety protocols that we all rely on today, ensuring this specific kind of tragedy literally never happens again. Now, more than 100 years later, the shattered remains of the Titanic still rest deep down beneath the Atlantic Ocean. It's this haunting, frozen graveyard sitting in the abyss, and it's filled with the stories, the dreams, and the unanswered questions of the people who boarded back in 1912. It remains this incredibly powerful historical anchor. It fascinates millions of us around the world because, let's be honest, it's so much more than just a sunken ship. It's a towering monument to human arrogance. The Titanic stands as a permanent reminder that even the greatest, most confident creations we can come up with can just disappear in a single, terrifying moment. Which leaves us with this final, really crucial question to reflect on. As we keep building faster, smarter, and bigger, are we ever truly going to stop believing that our technology is too advanced to fail? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.